It is a confusing word. While masculine and feminine are being redefined by a Me Too movement and LGBTQ culture, traditional views of men and women still have a strong influence. Gender education, the means to rise above the limitations that the prejudices society placed upon them. Kurosawa's The Showman still have the power to fascinate and help us grapple with what is and is not true in our own lives. To talk about the gender and how that mixed as masculinity and femininity. In one man's story, he is a hero, the bravest, most skillful fighters in the land. But in the different man's visions, that heroes fight scenes shows two scared, clumsy men that are rolling around on the ground. The woman in the group that presented herself as meek and helpless when she tells the story, as that day's culture expected women to be. But another man describes her as laughing so wildly at the two fighting men, calling them weak and unmanly. When the American people typically saw the world in black and white, men were men, women were women. Movies were about good guys and bad guys, and heroes were almost always white and male. Life wasn't really like that, but kids learned those things through the culture. The world looks a lot different now, and that is a good thing in so many ways. Women can be scientists, engineers, or action heroes. Stories of the black, brown, and Asian people are seen more often in history books and the arts. Same-sex marriage is illegal in some countries. Those are just a few changes we have seen in our lifetime, and none of them came easily as the changes never does. There were a lot of social revolutions and sexual revolution and feminism. There were a lot of throwing aside the usual rules. There was a boy whose name was Life, and girls whose name Autumn Lane. A lot of names are like people named like Love, Peace, or Ocean, or Sky. In 1953, to avoid the repetitive use of names, the system was revised so that the storms would be given female names. By doing this, the National Weather Service was mimicking the habit of naval meteorologists who named the storms after women. Much of the ships at sea were traditionally named for women. While people have been naming major storms for hundreds of years, most hurricanes were originally designed by a system of latitude longitude numbers, which was useful to meteorologists to try and to track these storms. Unfortunately, this system was confusing to people living on coast seeking hurricane information. In the early 1950s, a formal practice for storm naming was first developed for the Atlantic Ocean by the U.S. National Hurricane Center. At that time, storms were named accordingly to Atlantic alphabet: Abel, Baker, Charles, and the names used were the same for each hurricane season. In other words, the first hurricane of the season was always named Abel, the second as a Baker, and so on. The practice of naming hurricanes shortly after women's came to an end in 1978, when men's and women's names were included in the East and North Pacific storms list. In 1979, males and females' names were included on list for the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. Dennis and Catherine's, Lawrence, Michael's, Maria, the Cain, Lola, Marco, Nana, and Simon and Wynette. Gender is a part of your core identity, and its goal is unquestioned as soon as we started questioning. People break down and say, I don't know what gender is. I just know it's there. Gender stereotype theory suggested that men are generally perceived as more masculine than women, whereas women are generally perceived as more feminine than men. Several scales have been developed to measure fundamental aspects of gender stereotypes. The children and gender that focused on this discussion, I studied that they pondered the gender stereotypes and constraints that they encountered in childhood. As girls who steered away from science or sports, or boys who felt they couldn't express certain emotions. Those who live beyond the traditional gendered boundaries may encounter the people to conceive of their own gender, rather than leaning heavily on the taken for granted categories. There's an opportunity to think about it and unpack the containers we call man or woman or he or she to a life-changing transformation or a new name, but it may offer a more nuanced understanding of who we are. People who identify it as non-binary are increasingly recognized within the larger transgender world. They chronicle their intellectual and physical journeys, tackled semantics questions, and connected with others who are transcending the gender norms. They were not exclusively a man or a woman. Some said that they were both, some said neither. The 2020, just can 2020 just be over it? It's too much. This as the fatigues. They're getting worse and worse. It's never going to get better. Steady danger of overlapping the disasters, COVID-19 pandemics, wildfires, and severe weather, nature disasters, warning words can affect the disaster preparedness and recovery. What we can do to keep ourselves and others safe. How to prepare for similar disasters as the effects of global warming accelerated. Getting healthcare can also become harder and during a natural disaster. Hospitals may see an influx of injuries and block access to facilities. It essentially overwhelms psychologically. We are beings to constantly bombarded with negative informations. The world, the world would really be untroubled. Individual action do count because they accumulated. The worst thing that we could do is throw up our hands and say nothing matters.